Have you ever loved someone so deeply, only to realize one day they pushed you aside, like you never mattered? Have you ever felt invisible, like your voice was swallowed by silence? If you have, then trust me, you're not alone. Elena's story is not just about betrayal. It's about every one of us who's ever been broken, abandoned, or left fighting to survive. Life has a way of throwing us into the storm when we least expect it. But here's the truth. Storms don't just drown us. They reveal who we really are. So let me ask you, what storm are you facing right now? And are you ready to rise from it, stronger than before? If this story touched your heart, please like this video, share it with someone who needs strength, and subscribe to our channel. Together, we'll turn pain into power. The night was velvet black, the kind of darkness that swallows sound and leaves only the crash of waves. From the pier, floodlights cast harsh beams across the restless sea, glinting off champagne glasses and polished shoes. A charity gala had just ended at the coastal estate of Adrian, a man whose ambition was as vast as the ocean itself. Guests were departing in sleek cars, but one scene lingered like a scar burned into memory. Adrian stood near the edge of the pier, tuxedo jacket tossed carelessly aside, his jaw locked in fury. His mistress, Selina, clung to his arm, her glittering eyes fixed not on him, but on the diamond bracelet dangling from her wrist. It sparkled like stolen starlight. She had demanded it that very evening, not with words, but with a silent, expectant look that had cut through Adrian's pride like a knife. And he had delivered, slipping it onto her pale skin in front of everyone, a display of indulgence and arrogance. But standing only a few feet away, trembling in the cold sea breeze, was Elena, his wife. 6 months pregnant, her hand instinctively cradled the gentle curve of her belly, as if shielding the fragile life within from the storm raging around her. Her eyes were wide, glassy with disbelief. She had arrived at the gala to support her husband, clutching hope like a lifeline, only to be treated as invisible, discarded like an afterthought. Selina's laugh rang out, sharp and cruel. "She looks pathetic," she whispered loudly enough for Elena to hear. "That dress isn't even new, is it? Adrian, you deserve someone who shines with you, not drags you down." Adrian's lips curled into a smile that wasn't kind. "You're right," he muttered. Elena flinched as though the words were a slap. Her heart pounded with the weight of betrayal, heavier than the baby she carried. This was the man she had believed in, the man she had left her teaching job for, the man she had once trusted to protect her. Yet tonight, beneath the cruel glow of the floodlights, she was nothing more than an obstacle to be removed. The wind howled, lifting strands of Elena's hair into her tear-streaked face. She tried to speak, her voice breaking. "Adrian, I'm your wife. I'm carrying your child. How can you do this?" Her plea was cut short. Adrian grabbed her wrist, his grip bruising, his eyes cold as the sea. "You think this baby matters? You think you matter? You're nothing, Elena, nothing compared to what I can achieve with Selina by my side." Gasps echoed from a few lingering guests who had not yet departed. But none stepped forward. Power cloaked Adrian like armor. Fear kept their tongues tied. Elena shook her head, desperate. "Please. For our child." Adrian's hand shoved hard against her shoulder. The world tilted. The wooden planks of the pier disappeared beneath her feet. For a suspended second, silence engulfed her, broken only by the glitter of Selina's bracelet catching the light like a cruel omen. Then came the plunge. The sea swallowed her whole, its icy claws dragging her down. Salt stung her throat as she gasped, water invading her lungs. Panic exploded inside her chest. She kicked, arms thrashing, but her dress tangled around her legs like a shroud. Above, the lights blurred, fading fast as waves churned mercilessly. Adrian didn't move. Selina leaned against him, her smile satisfied, as if erasing a wife was nothing more than a transaction. The remaining guests averted their eyes, pretending not to notice. Wealth and influence bought silence. Underwater, Elena fought with every shred of strength. Her lungs screamed. She thought of the tiny heartbeat inside her, the baby she had whispered lullabies to at night. She couldn't give up. Not yet. Not while another life depended on her. Her arms clawed upward, breaking the surface for a brief, desperate gasp. The night air tore into her chest like fire. "Help!" she cried, her voice ragged, almost drowned by the roar of the waves. But from the pier, Adrian only turned away. "She won't last long," he said flatly. "Let's go." Selina's laugh trailed behind them as they disappeared into the glow of the estate. The water dragged Elena back down, colder now, darker. Her strength waned, limbs heavy as lead. Images flickered in her mind, her classroom full of children's laughter. The first time Adrian held her hand, the secret smile she gave when she first felt her baby kick. Memories blurred with the suffocating black. She sank deeper. The world narrowed to silence and pressure. Her eyes closed. And then, fingers. Rough, strong fingers wrapped around her arm, pulling her upward with force that defied the sea. Her body broke the surface, and she coughed violently, air slicing into her lungs. Through blurred vision, she caught a glimpse of a shadowy figure, a man with weathered features and eyes as sharp as steel. The sea roared around them, but his voice cut through the chaos. "Hold on, don't you dare let go." Elena clung to consciousness, the words anchoring her to life. On the pier, no one noticed. Adrian was gone. Selina was gone. The party was over. But for Elena, the true story had only just begun, because the man who pulled her from the sea was the last person she expected to save her. Elena Moore had always been a woman who believed in simple joys. She grew up in a small coastal town where the scent of salt water clung to the air and gulls cried above the rooftops. Her childhood was not gilded with wealth or luxury. It was marked by second-hand clothes, homemade bread, and nights spent listening to her mother's soft voice reading bedtime stories by the glow of a kerosene lamp. Yet despite the hardships, she carried within her a light that others noticed, a kindness that seemed untouched by the world's cruelty. From the beginning, Elena learned to survive storms. Her father, a fisherman, had vanished into the sea when she was just 7. One day his boat left the harbor, and it never returned. Her mother bore the weight of grief with quiet resilience, raising Elena alone until illness claimed her too. By the time Elena turned 18, she was an orphan, clutching nothing but a scholarship letter and her mother's locket. Teaching had not been her childhood dream, but it became her calling. Standing before a classroom of eager children, she discovered a sense of belonging. She loved their laughter, their endless questions, their unpolished honesty. Her salary barely covered rent for her modest apartment, but she was content. She didn't need much. Love, she thought, would be enough. Then came Adrian Moore. He wasn't the type of man who usually noticed women like her. Tall, confident, with sharp suits and sharper words, he carried the aura of a man climbing toward greatness. When he walked into the community center where Elena was organizing a book fair, heads turned. But it was Elena's gentle smile that drew him. He pursued her with the intensity of a man who always got what he wanted. Roses delivered to her classroom, candlelit dinners in restaurants she had never dreamed of entering. Promises whispered in the dark, promises that made her believe she was chosen, not by chance, but by destiny. Elena resisted at first. She knew men like Adrian, men who burned bright but often left others in ashes. Yet he insisted he was different. He told her he loved her humility, her warmth, the way she saw goodness in places he overlooked. "You make me want to be better," he confessed one night under a canopy of stars, and she believed him. Within a year, she was no longer Elena the teacher, but Elena Moore, wife of a rising entrepreneur. She traded her cramped apartment for a seaside villa, her second-hand dresses for gowns Adrian bought with a flourish. Yet she held on to her job at the school, insisting that it grounded her. Adrian laughed, but allowed it, at least in the beginning. The cracks appeared slowly. A critical word here, a condescending smile there. He criticized her cooking, her clothes, her insistence on taking the bus instead of the chauffeured car. "You should look the part," he often said. "A man like me needs a wife who dazzles." Each remark chipped away at her confidence, but Elena endured. She told herself he was stressed, that success demanded sacrifice. Then came the pregnancy. For Elena, it was a miracle. The first flutter of life beneath her ribs filled her with awe. She imagined tiny fingers curling around hers, lullabies sung in the quiet hours of the night, a family rebuilt after all she had lost. When she told Adrian, tears of joy shone in her eyes. His reaction, however, was a faint smile that never reached his gaze. "That's good news," he muttered before pouring another drink. Still, Elena nurtured her hope. She decorated the nursery with pastel colors, read parenting books late into the night, whispered promises to the child she carried. But Adrian grew distant, his nights longer, his temper sharper. And then came Selina Hart. Selina entered their lives like a storm wrapped in silk. She was young, ambitious, stunning, the kind of woman magazines placed on covers. Adrian introduced her as his new assistant, but Elena saw the truth in the way his eyes lingered too long, in the sudden scent of unfamiliar perfume on his shirts. She tried to confront him once, gently, but his response was a cruel laugh. "You're paranoid. Don't embarrass yourself." So Elena stayed silent, retreating further into herself. She told no one of the loneliness that gnawed at her, the sleepless nights spent wondering if she was enough. Her friends noticed her fading smile, the shadows beneath her eyes, but she brushed off their concern with practiced lies. "I'm fine," she'd say, her hand resting protectively on her belly. "We're fine." But she wasn't fine. The night Adrian shoved her into the sea had been the culmination of months of erasure. She had become invisible in her own home, a shadow of the woman who once believed love could heal wounds. And yet, even in her darkest moment, sinking beneath the waves, her thoughts had been of the life inside her. The baby was her anchor, the reason she clawed for air, the reason she refused to let go. Now, as she lay shivering in a stranger's arms after being pulled from death's grip, Elena realized the truth. She had been blind. Adrian had never loved her, not truly. What he loved was power, admiration, and the thrill of conquest. She had been convenient, nothing more. And Selina, the glittering bracelet on her wrist, was proof that Adrian's loyalty could be bought with jewels. Tears burned Elena's eyes, but they were not the tears of weakness. They were the ashes of illusions, the final pieces of a life she would no longer cling to. Something inside her had shifted, subtle but irreversible. The teacher who once endured cruelty and silence was gone. What remained was a mother, a survivor, a woman who would no longer beg for scraps of love. The man who saved her tightened his grip, dragging her onto the deck of a small fishing vessel. His weathered face loomed above hers, lined with years of hardship, eyes unyielding. She coughed, water streaming from her lips, and whispered the only question that mattered. "Why? Why would you save me?" His reply was a low rumble, steady as the tide. "Because your life isn't meant to end here, Elena. You have a storm to unleash." Her heart lurched. She didn't yet understand who this man was or what fate had woven between them. But in that moment, she knew one thing with absolute certainty. She would not return to Adrian's house, not as a broken wife. Because her story was no longer about survival, it was about awakening. The world seemed divided into two realms that night: the glittering, perfumed halls of Adrian Moore's estate and the brutal, salt-stained vastness of the sea. On one side, chandeliers blazed with golden light, casting a glow over marble floors and mirrored walls. Guests drifted between tables draped in silk, sipping champagne worth more than an average family's monthly rent. Violins sang a melody that rose and fell with practiced elegance, masking the sharp whispers of gossip that always followed men like Adrian. His gala was the talk of the season, a celebration of his latest business deal, a maritime contract that promised him dominance in the shipping industry. The centerpiece of the night was not the contract, nor even Adrian himself. It was Selina Hart. She moved through the ballroom in a crimson gown that clung to her like a second skin, her wrist flashing with the diamond bracelet Adrian had gifted her. Every glance, every smirk from the crowd confirmed what she already knew. She was no longer just his assistant. She was his prize. Yet beneath the surface elegance, tension simmered. Some noticed Elena's absence from the gala. Others whispered that Adrian's marriage was crumbling, though few dared say it aloud. In the world of power and money, appearances mattered more than vows. Adrian, flushed with pride, pretended not to notice. He raised his glass, toasted his own success, and pressed a possessive hand against Selina's back as if branding her as his new emblem of victory. Far from the glowing chandeliers, the other realm was raw, merciless. The sea stretched endlessly, a 10,000 square kilometer wilderness of darkness and foam. The wind howled with a feral voice, salt spray slapping against the wooden hull of the fishing vessel where Elena now lay shivering beneath a coarse blanket. The man who had saved her, his name still unknown, moved with the quiet assurance of someone long married to the ocean. He adjusted the nets, secured ropes against the gale, then crouched beside her. His face was weathered by sun and storm, his hands calloused from decades of labor. "You need warmth," he said simply, draping an oilskin coat over her trembling shoulders. Elena's teeth chattered, but her eyes burned with a clarity she hadn't felt in months. The estate she had left behind, the mansion with its glittering lights, now seemed like a mirage. Here, amid the endless roar of waves, she felt stripped of illusions. Every cruel word Adrian had spoken, every humiliating glance Selina had thrown, fell away into insignificance compared to the fight for breath, the raw truth of survival. The boat pitched violently, throwing spray across the deck. Elena clutched the rail, her stomach lurching. "Why? Why were you there?" she managed to ask. The man studied her, his expression unreadable. "Because some debts cannot be ignored. You'll understand soon enough." His words unsettled her, sparking questions she was too weak to voice. Exhaustion dragged her eyelids heavy, but in the back of her mind a storm of emotions raged. Grief, betrayal, fury, and somewhere deep within, a flicker of resolve. Back at the mansion, the gala reached its peak. Adrian stood on the balcony overlooking the sea, Selina beside him, her laughter cutting through the night air. Fireworks exploded overhead, painting the sky in red and gold. The guests cheered, oblivious to the darkness lurking beneath the spectacle. To them, Adrian was untouchable, a man who bent the world to his will. But even as the fireworks glittered, a single absence shadowed the celebration. Elena. Some guests had noticed her arrival earlier in the evening, pale and tentative in a simple dress. Then she was gone. Whispers churned. Had there been a scene? Did Adrian dismiss her? Or had she finally retreated from the spotlight altogether? Adrian dismissed the murmurs with a smug smile, confident that silence could always be bought. He had erased her presence with one push, and the sea would take care of the rest. Beside him, Selina leaned close, murmuring sweet assurances that fed his pride. "It's better this way," she purred. "You're free now, free to rise higher." But the sea did not keep secrets. Out on the fishing vessel, Elena's rescuer steered toward a distant shore. The coastline loomed faintly through the mist, jagged cliffs rising like dark sentinels. "We'll dock there," he said. "You'll be safe for tonight." Elena hugged the blanket tighter, the chill of seawater still clinging to her bones. Her mind spun. Safe? What did safety even mean anymore? Her husband had tried to kill her. The man she trusted most had betrayed her in front of strangers. She was carrying a child into a world where cruelty was rewarded and loyalty discarded. The rescuer's gaze lingered on her. "You've been through hell," he said quietly, "but sometimes hell is where you find out who you truly are." His words struck something deep within her. She thought of her students, the way she had always told them that courage wasn't the absence of fear, but the choice to keep going despite it. Could she live by those words now? Could she rise when Adrian wanted her erased? As the boat scraped against the dock, Elena stood shakily, her legs unsteady. The man offered his arm, steadying her. For a moment, their eyes locked. There was recognition there, though she couldn't place it. An unspoken connection that made her chest tighten. "You don't know me yet," he said softly, almost to himself. "But you will, and when you do, you'll understand why saving you was the only choice." Elena stepped onto the dock, her feet pressing into solid ground once more. The sea thundered behind her, relentless, eternal, but she no longer felt like its victim. For the first time since Adrian's hand shoved her into the abyss, she felt a spark of defiance. She was not gone. She was not erased. And somewhere in the mansion, glittering across the waves, Adrian Moore was celebrating too soon. Because the woman he thought the sea had claimed was already walking toward a destiny he could never control. Adrian Moore had always considered himself a man destined for greatness. In his mind, success was not earned through patience or compassion, but seized with boldness, cunning, and a willingness to discard anything or anyone that slowed him down. That belief had carried him from the son of a bankrupt merchant to the owner of a flourishing shipping company. A man whose name appeared in financial magazines and whose parties filled the society pages. To the outside world, he was a rising star. But those who looked closely saw the cracks. Behind his polished smile was an insatiable hunger, a need to prove that he was more than the failures of his past. Every deal he struck, every gala he hosted, every expensive gift he paraded was less about wealth and more about vengeance. Vengeance against a world that once dismissed him as nothing. Selina Hart understood that hunger better than anyone. She had recognized it the moment she stepped into his office, balancing charm with ambition. Her resume was thin, her experience modest, but her beauty and wit made her unforgettable. Adrian had hired her within minutes, not because of her skills, but because of the way she looked at him. Not with respect, but with hunger that matched his own. At first, Selina played her role carefully. She fetched coffee, typed reports, and sat quietly in meetings, her presence a subtle perfume in the air. But when Adrian's gaze lingered on her a moment too long, she seized the opening. A laugh at his jokes, a brush of her hand against his arm, a whisper that fed his ego. Within weeks, she had transitioned from assistant to confidante. Within months, she was the shadow at his side in every private dinner, every late-night strategy session. Adrian told himself he deserved her. Elena was plain, fragile, weighed down by sentiment and morality. Selina was fire, ambitious, unapologetic, willing to push boundaries. She didn't scold him for overspending or question his endless schemes. She applauded them. And when she leaned close, her lips painted crimson, she told him exactly what he wanted to hear. You were meant for more. With me, you'll get it. But Selina was no fool. She had her own ambitions, and Adrian was her ladder. She had grown up in a cramped apartment above a laundromat, watching her mother count tips and cry into tired hands. Selina swore she would never live like that. She wanted penthouses, designer gowns, a life where doors opened before she even touched the handle. Adrian was her ticket, and she would ride it as far as it could take her. Her strategy was simple: feed his pride, sharpen his greed, and demand proof of his devotion. That night at the gala, she had set her eyes on the diamond bracelet displayed in the showcase of a luxury jeweler. It would look perfect on me, she had murmured. Adrian had hesitated. $10,000 for a trinket? But then, she tilted her head, her eyes narrowing. If you can't even give me this, maybe you're not the man I thought you were. The challenge cut deep. Adrian's pride flared. Within hours, the bracelet was hers, clasped around her wrist in front of every guest at the gala. He watched her smile, her laughter like music, and felt a surge of power. Yes, he thought. This is who I am meant to be, the man who can give the world to the woman everyone else envies. Elena's presence that evening had been an inconvenience, an echo of a life he wanted erased. When she looked at him with those pleading eyes, reminding him of vows spoken in another time, he felt not guilt, but irritation. She represented weakness, humility, compassion, sacrifice. Traits he had long buried. When Selina whispered, "She doesn't belong here," Adrian didn't hesitate. His shove was not just physical, it was symbolic. In his mind, he had cast off the last chain holding him back. Back in the mansion after the gala, Adrian poured himself a drink, savoring the burn of whiskey. Selina curled on the velvet couch, her gown pooling around her like liquid fire. "You did the right thing," she purred. "You don't need her dragging you down. With me, you'll conquer the world." Adrian smirked, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. She was weak. Weak people drown. Strong ones rise. But even in his triumph, shadows lingered. His company, though expanding, was drowning in debt. Investors whispered doubts about his reckless spending. He had burned bridges with partners, taken risks that could implode if even one shipment failed. Adrian dismissed the warnings. Failure was for men without vision. He would gamble everything, convinced he was untouchable. Selina, however, noticed. She had begun asking careful questions about the accounts, the loans, the contracts signed in desperation. Her smile never faltered, but in her mind, she made plans. If Adrian fell, she would not fall with him. She would take what she could and find another ladder. After all she had learned from watching him, loyalty was a game for fools. What Adrian didn't know, what Selina didn't suspect, was that the very woman they believed swallowed by the sea was alive. And Elena was no longer the fragile teacher they dismissed. That night, while Adrian basked in false victory and Selina admired her glittering bracelet in the mirror, a storm gathered silently. Elena was breathing. Elena was remembering. Elena was changing. And soon the world Adrian had built on betrayal and arrogance would tremble, because the wife he thought drowned would return, not as his shadow, but as his reckoning. The days following the gala unfolded like a cruel theater. Every headline, every whisper, another knife twisting in Elena's absence. In the city's glossy magazines, photographs of Adrian and Selina dominated the pages. One captured them leaving the estate, her crimson gown clinging to her curves, the diamond bracelet glittering like a trophy. Another showed Adrian with his arm draped around her shoulders, his smile smug, his posture triumphant. The captions were merciless. Shipping mogul's new flame stuns at gala. Adrian Moore's mystery woman, has he finally found his match? No one asked about Elena. No one wondered why the wife, pregnant and loyal, had vanished from his side. In the world of money and power, absence was interpreted as irrelevance. She had been erased not only from Adrian's life, but from the very narrative of his success. Inside the mansion, Adrian reveled in the spectacle. He paced the marble halls with Selina at his side, drinking in the attention like a man starved. Each article that praised their union, each whisper of admiration from investors, fed his pride. "See," he told Selina one morning, slamming the newspaper down on the breakfast table. "They finally understand who I am. With you, I'm untouchable." Selina only smiled, sipping her champagne at 10 in the morning. "You've never looked more powerful," she purred. Yet deep inside, her thoughts flickered with calculation. Power was intoxicating, yes, but unstable. Adrian's debts loomed larger each week, and though she played the role of adoring mistress, she was already studying potential exits. Meanwhile, the humiliation of Elena's erasure seeped deeper. Neighbors whispered cruel assumptions, that she had abandoned Adrian in shame, that she was too fragile for his world, that she had been unworthy of him all along. Some pitied her, others mocked her. No one imagined she was alive, shivering on a stranger's cot, piecing together the shards of her life. From the small harbor town where her rescuer had taken her, Elena overheard fragments of this public story. At the market, two women chattered over fresh fish. "Did you see the photos?" one said. "That Selina girl is stunning. Poor Elena, though maybe not poor, maybe smart. Better to leave a man like Adrian before he leaves you." "Leave?" the other scoffed. "He's already upgraded. She's old news." Elena's heart clenched, but she forced herself to keep walking, her scarf pulled tight around her face. She wanted to scream that she had not left, that she had been discarded, that her silence was not consent, but survival. But the words died in her throat. She was not ready. Not yet. The humiliation deepened when Adrian staged another gala, less than a month after the night he'd tried to kill her. This time, he hosted it in the grand ballroom of a luxury hotel downtown. The chandeliers sparkled, the orchestra swelled, and Selina descended the staircase on his arm like a queen coronated in jewels. Cameras flashed, capturing every angle. "Tonight," Adrian announced to the crowd, his voice amplified through the hall, "we celebrate not only business triumphs but new beginnings." He raised Selina's hand, kissed her knuckles, and smiled at the sea of faces. "This woman has given me strength, vision, and love I never thought possible. With her, the future is limitless." The applause thundered. Glasses clinked, laughter rippled across the room. And Elena, hidden far from the ballroom, sat in the flickering glow of an old television in a fisherman's shack. She watched the broadcast with trembling hands, her unborn child kicking faintly as if sensing her turmoil. Adrian's words cut deeper than the shove that had sent her into the sea. He had not only betrayed her, he had publicly declared her irrelevant, replaced, erased. Her rescuer, sitting quietly in the corner, finally spoke. "Does it hurt?" Elena turned to him, her eyes brimming with tears. "It's worse than hurt. It's like I never existed." The old man studied her, his gaze steady. "Then make them remember." Back in the ballroom, Selina basked in the attention. Women envied her, men admired her, and Adrian whispered promises of empires into her ear. But even as she smiled, she noticed the glances of doubt from certain investors. They saw the extravagance, the recklessness. They questioned how long this golden facade could last. Selina's smile never wavered, but in her mind she filed away names, faces, and opportunities. The night ended with Adrian lifting a toast. "To us," he declared, "to the empire we are building, and to those who doubted, watch and learn." Cheers filled the hall. But beyond the glitter, beyond the applause, a storm brewed unseen. Elena lay awake that night in the small harbor town, the humiliation of her erasure gnawing at her. Yet beneath the pain, something new stirred. Anger. Resolve. A flame that would not be extinguished. She whispered to her unborn child, her hand resting protectively on her belly. "They think we're gone. They think we're nothing, but we will show them. We will rise." Her rescuer's voice drifted from the shadows. "Good. Because you'll need that fire. Your fight has only begun." And as the first rays of dawn broke over the horizon, Elena knew that the time for silence was ending. The nights in the harbor town were colder than Elena imagined. Wind whistled through the cracks of the fisherman's shack, rattling the windows like a mournful chorus. She slept on a narrow cot, wrapped in borrowed blankets, yet sleep never came easily. Whenever her eyes closed, she saw Adrian's face. The moment his hand struck her shoulder, the flash of triumph in Selina's smirk, the black water rising around her. She would jolt awake gasping, clutching her belly, as if to reassure herself the baby was still there, still alive. Each kick from within was both comfort and torment. Comfort because she wasn't alone. Torment because she feared she couldn't protect this innocent life. By day, she wandered the narrow docks, her steps uncertain. The town smelled of brine and smoke, the cries of gulls overhead mingling with the shouts of fishermen hauling their catches. No one recognized her. To them, she was just another weary traveler, a woman too pale, too quiet, her eyes haunted by something unspoken. Her rescuer, whose name she finally learned was Samuel, gave her space. He was a man of few words, his days consumed by nets, ropes, and the rhythm of the sea. At night, he sometimes sat across from her, sipping strong tea, his weathered hands steady. "You're safe here," he would say. But safe felt like a cruel illusion. What did safety mean when the man she once called husband was toasting his future with another woman, parading her bracelet like a crown? What did safety mean when the world believed Elena Moore was gone, irrelevant, forgotten? The humiliation of it all hollowed her. She stopped combing her hair, stopped eating more than a few bites. Her reflection in the cracked mirror frightened her. Sunken cheeks, eyes rimmed with red, lips pressed in a thin line of exhaustion. "You're disappearing," she whispered to herself one night, "just like they wanted." Samuel noticed. "You can't wither away," he said gruffly, sliding a plate of bread and fish toward her. "You carry two lives now. One of them doesn't get a choice. Don't steal that choice from them." Elena stared at the plate, her throat tight. She wanted to tell him she had no strength left, that the weight of betrayal crushed her. But when her hand brushed against her belly and felt the flutter of movement, she forced herself to eat. Every bite tasted like ash, but she swallowed, not for herself, but for the child. Still, despair shadowed her. One evening, unable to bear the walls of the shack, she walked to the cliffside. The ocean stretched endless before her, the same ocean that had nearly claimed her. She stood at the edge, the wind tearing at her dress, her hair whipping wildly. A terrible thought whispered, "If I stepped forward, it would all be over. The pain, the humiliation, the loneliness." Her heart pounded. The baby shifted inside her, a small but insistent reminder. She placed both hands over her belly, tears streaming down her face. "I don't know if I can do this," she confessed to the night. "I don't know if I'm strong enough." Behind her, footsteps crunched on the gravel. Samuel's voice was calm, but firm. "If you fall, he wins. If you live, you fight. Which do you choose?" Elena turned, her face streaked with tears. "I don't know how to fight." "You'll learn," Samuel said simply. "The world has already tried to drown you. You're still here. That means something." His words echoed in her, but the weight of despair still clung. She returned to the shack, collapsed onto the cot, and curled into herself. For hours she lay motionless, listening to the wind howl, trying to remember the sound of her own laughter. The days blurred. Time became a fog. She avoided the market, avoided the townsfolk, afraid someone might recognize her. Shame gnawed at her, shame for surviving when the world believed she was gone, shame for still loving fragments of the man who had betrayed her. One night, exhaustion finally dragged her into deeper sleep. She dreamed of her classroom, the children's voices bright and pure. They called her name, reaching for her. But when she reached back, the children faded, replaced by Adrian's cold smile and Selina's mocking laughter. The sea surged again, swallowing her whole. She woke screaming, drenched in sweat. Samuel rushed in, gripping her shoulders. "It's just a dream," he said firmly. But Elena shook her head, sobbing. "It's not just a dream, it's my life. I lost everything. I am nothing." Samuel's expression hardened. "You are not nothing. You are still breathing, still carrying life. That alone makes you everything." His words broke something inside her, releasing tears she had held back for weeks. She cried until her body trembled, until there was nothing left but exhaustion. Samuel stayed beside her, silent, steady, his presence an anchor. When the storm of grief passed, Elena lay staring at the ceiling. For the first time she realized she had reached the bottom. There was nowhere lower to fall. And in that bleak truth, a fragile seed of strength took root. She whispered into the darkness, more to herself than to Samuel. "If I am still here, maybe it's for a reason." Her rescuer nodded once, as if he had been waiting to hear those words. And in that moment, something shifted. The despair that had consumed her did not vanish, but it cracked, allowing a sliver of resolve to seep through. Because sometimes, rock bottom isn't the end, it's the foundation for something greater. The storm had passed, leaving the harbor drenched in silver moonlight. The sea, restless just hours ago, now breathed quietly against the rocks. Elena sat on the dock, her hands cradling her belly, her thoughts heavier than the tide. She had spoken the words aloud. "If I am still here, maybe it's for a reason." But she still did not know what that reason was. Samuel approached silently, his boots thudding against the wood. He carried a bundle under his arm, wrapped in oilcloth. Without a word, he lowered himself beside her. For a long while, they sat in silence, listening to the sea. Finally, Samuel unwrapped the bundle. Inside was a leather-bound ledger, weathered and cracked by years of use. He flipped it open, the pages filled with names, numbers, and signatures. "Do you know what this is?" he asked. Elena shook her head. "It's a record," Samuel said. "A record of ships, contracts, families tied to the ocean. Your family is in here." Elena frowned, confused. "My family? That can't be. I don't have one. My father was a fisherman who drowned. My mother, she died when I was young. There's no one else." Samuel's eyes, sharp and steady, pierced through her disbelief. "That's what you were told. But the truth is different. Your father was not just a fisherman. He was Richard Moore's son." The name struck her like lightning. Adrian's grandfather. The patriarch of Moore shipping. The man whispered about in business circles as ruthless, brilliant, untouchable. Elena shook her head violently. "No, that's impossible. If it were true, I would have known." Samuel turned another page, revealing a faded photograph tucked into the ledger. In it, a young man with familiar eyes, her eyes, stood proudly beside a ship. Beside him, a stern older man, Richard Moore. And in the corner of the photo, scrawled in ink, were names. Her father's name, her mother's. Her breath caught. She reached out with trembling fingers, brushing the photograph as though it might vanish. This can't be real." "It is," Samuel said firmly. "Your father walked away from the Moore Empire. He wanted a different life, love instead of power. He married your mother against Richard's wishes. They lived quietly, hoping to escape the weight of that name. But tragedy found them anyway. And when they died, you were left in the shadows. No one told you who you were." Elena's pulse thundered in her ears. She thought of all the years she had struggled, believing herself ordinary, insignificant. She thought of Adrian, mocking her for being weak, for being nothing. And now this man was telling her she was a Moore by blood? Tears blurred her vision. Why are you telling me this now?" Samuel hesitated, his jaw tightening. Then he met her gaze. "Because I am Richard Moore." The world tilted. Elena stared at him, her mind reeling. The weathered fisherman, the man who had pulled her from the sea, was none other than the patriarch himself? She laughed, a broken sound, shaking her head. "No, Richard Moore is a titan, a billionaire, a man who lives in penthouses and boardrooms. You're just an old man who's seen too much," he finished for her. His eyes were not angry but filled with something else, weariness, regret. "I built an empire, Elena, ships, ports, contracts that span the globe. But in the end, I lost my family. My son walked away from me. I never forgave him. And then he died before I could make it right. For years, I told myself it was his fault, not mine, until I found you." Elena's heart pounded. "Why save me?" she whispered. "Because blood recognizes blood," Richard said quietly. "When I saw you fall, I knew. The way you fought against the sea, the fire in your eyes, it was him, my son, and I could not let the ocean take you too." Her body trembled as the truth sank in. She was not a powerless teacher abandoned by fate. She was the heir to a dynasty Adrian had clawed his way into by marriage. All along, Adrian had mocked her, belittled her, even tried to kill her, never realizing she carried the very bloodline he worshipped. Anger surged, burning away the last remnants of despair. "He wanted me gone," Elena said bitterly, "because he thought I was nothing." Richard's lips pressed into a thin line. "Then let him learn the truth. Let the man who threw you into the sea face the storm he created." Elena's breath came fast, her hands curling into fists. For weeks she had drowned in shame, convinced she was invisible. But now the humiliation transformed into something else. Power. Not borrowed, not stolen, but hers by right. She looked at Richard, her voice trembling but resolute. "If I am a Moor, then I will not hide anymore." Richard studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "Good. Because the empire you thought belonged to Adrian, it was never his. It's yours." The words struck like thunder. Hers. The shipping lines, the contracts, the legacy. Not Adrian's prize, not Selina's ladder. Hers. The sea crashed against the dock, spraying cold mist into the air. Elena closed her eyes, inhaling deeply. For the first time she did not feel drowned by the ocean. She felt carried by it. She opened her eyes, fire blazing where despair once lived. "Then it's time," she whispered. "Time to rise." Richard's expression was unreadable, but there was pride in his eyes. "You will need strength, strategy, allies. The world thinks you're dead. Use that. Strike when they least expect it." Elena nodded slowly, her hand resting firmly over her belly. "He took everything from me. Now I'll take back what was mine all along." And as the moon broke through the clouds, casting silver light over her face, Elena Moore was no longer the woman Adrian had shoved into the sea. She was the storm rising to drown him. The dawn after Richard's revelation broke sharp and golden over the harbor. The gulls wheeled above the water, and the waves carried a new rhythm, as if the sea itself echoed Elena's rebirth. She stood on the dock, hair tangled by the wind, her face pale but steady. For weeks she had lived in the shadows, shrinking, grieving, drowning in humiliation. But now she carried truth in her veins. She was not merely Adrian's discarded wife. She was the heir to the very empire he had tried to steal. Inside the shack, Richard laid out papers, maps of shipping routes, balance sheets, and contracts. "These are the bones of Moore shipping," he explained. "Adrian plays at being a king, but he's reckless. He bleeds the company dry for champagne and jewelry. Investors doubt him. The moment you reveal who you are, the tide will turn." Elena stared at the documents, awe and fury colliding in her chest. Her name, her real name, belonged here. Not as a footnote, not as a forgotten widow, but as the rightful bloodline. For the first time she allowed herself to imagine it, walking into a boardroom, not as someone's wife, but as herself. Still, she hesitated. "They think I'm dead," she murmured. "They won't believe me." Richard's gaze was piercing. "Then show them, transform, become undeniable. The world doesn't listen to whispers, it listens to storms." That morning marked the beginning of her metamorphosis. Richard called in allies, old captains, lawyers, discreet stylists. They arrived one by one, each sworn to secrecy, each loyal to the Moore name. Elena, once a schoolteacher in modest dresses, was refashioned. Her hair, once tangled by salt water, was cut and styled into sleek waves. Her wardrobe shifted from simple cotton to tailored power, silk blouses, fitted suits, gowns that shimmered like liquid midnight. But the true transformation was not in fabric or hairstyle. It was in her eyes. Gone was the soft, uncertain gaze of a woman begging for scraps of affection. In its place burned steel, focused, relentless, ready. At first she stumbled. Speaking with lawyers felt alien. Financial reports made her dizzy. But Richard was patient. "Your mind is sharper than you think," he told her. "Adrian underestimated you because you let him. Stop letting men define your worth." Each day she grew stronger. She studied late into the night, poring over contracts, memorizing routes, learning the language of power. She practiced her voice, clear, commanding, unshaken. When she faltered, she reminded herself of the night Adrian shoved her into the sea. The memory no longer crushed her, it fueled her. One evening, after weeks of preparation, Richard tested her resolve. "What will you say," he asked, "when they question your survival, when they ask why you hid?" Elena met his gaze without flinching. "I'll tell them the truth. That my husband tried to erase me, that I rose from the sea he thought would claim me, and that I've returned not to beg, but to take back what is mine." Richard's lips curved into the faintest smile. "Then you are ready." Her transformation extended beyond strategy. She visited the nursery she had once imagined for her child, Pastel walls, soft toys, a cradle painted by her own hands. The memory ached, but she refused to cry. Instead, she designed a new nursery in her mind, one not in Adrian's mansion, but in her own home, her own space. She would raise her child not in fear, not in shame, but in dignity. The whispers of her return began before she even stepped into public. Investors received anonymous letters hinting at her survival. Old photographs resurfaced. Elena at charity events, her hand over her belly, her smile luminous. The resemblance to Richard's late son was undeniable. Questions stirred, doubts festered. Adrian's empire, once so dazzling, began to tremble. Selina noticed first. She cornered Adrian in his office, her voice sharp. "People are asking about your wife. They say she's alive." Adrian scoffed, but his hands clenched. "Nonsense. The sea doesn't give back what it takes." Selina's eyes narrowed. "Then why are investors pulling their funds? Why are they whispering her name?" For the first time, fear flickered across Adrian's face. Meanwhile, Elena stood before a mirror in the Harbor Inn, where Richard had arranged her transformation. She wore a black dress cut sharp, elegant, unyielding. Around her neck hung her mother's locket, the only piece of her old life she had carried. She touched it gently, a reminder of where she had come from and where she was going. She whispered to her reflection, "I am Elena Moore. I am not broken. I am not erased. I am the storm." That night, Richard brought her to the private dock where a sleek yacht waited. "Tomorrow," he said, "there's a shareholders' meeting. Adrian will be there, Selina at his side, believing he owns the room. You will walk in and everything will change." Elena inhaled deeply, the salt air filling her lungs. The waves crashed against the hull, a rhythm that now felt like an anthem. She thought of the girl she had been, the orphan, the teacher, the wife who endured cruelty in silence. That girl had died in the sea. What emerged was something new, something unshakable. She boarded the yacht, her heels clicking against the deck. Richard followed, his eyes glinting with pride and something else, relief. Perhaps, finally, he was mending the wound left by his son's death. Elena stood at the bow, the wind whipping her hair, her silhouette framed against the horizon. The city lights glittered in the distance, waiting. And as the yacht cut through the waves, she whispered to the night, "Adrian, you should have left me in the sea, because now I'm coming back for everything." The ballroom of the Grand Harbor Hotel glittered with wealth. Crystal chandeliers poured light over polished floors, and cameras flashed like lightning. It was Moore Shipping's annual shareholders' meeting, but the event looked more like a gala. The air buzzed with chatter, investors mingling with society elites, their voices hushed with anticipation. Adrian Moore was about to make a grand announcement. At the front of the hall, Adrian stood tall in his tailored suit, Selina shimmering at his side in a sapphire gown. She clutched his arm as though she already wore his crown. On her wrist, the infamous bracelet glinted beneath the chandeliers, a cruel jewel forged in betrayal. Adrian raised his glass, smiling at the crowd. "Tonight," he declared, "we celebrate expansion. Moore Shipping is poised to dominate new markets, bigger than ever before. And with my partner beside me," he gestured to Selina, who beamed at the cameras, "we are unstoppable." The audience applauded, though not with the fervor Adrian expected. Whispers lingered in the corners, doubts gnawed at trust. Investors had heard rumors of a wife not dead, of a bloodline ignored, of a truth that could shatter everything. And then the doors opened. Every head turned. Silence rippled through the hall like a shockwave. She walked in. Elena Moore. The woman who had been erased, mourned, forgotten, alive. She wore a gown black as midnight, her shoulders bare, her hair gleaming in sleek waves. Around her neck glimmered her mother's locket, the only softness in a look sharp enough to cut glass. She moved with measured grace, each step deliberate, heels echoing against marble like a drumbeat of war. Gasps burst across the room. Cameras whirred. Someone whispered her name, trembling. "Elena." Adrian froze. The color drained from his face. For a heartbeat, he looked like he'd seen a ghost. Selina's fingers tightened on his arm, nails digging into his suit. Elena stopped at the center of the ballroom. Her gaze swept the crowd, calm and unyielding. Then she spoke, her voice clear, resonant, carrying across the hall. "You thought I was gone," she said, eyes locked on Adrian. "You thought the sea had swallowed me. But I survived, and now I return. Not as your wife, not as your victim, but as Elena Moore, rightful heir to this empire." Gasps exploded. Murmurs surged through the room like a rising tide. Reporters scrambled to capture every word. Adrian stammered, his composure crumbling. This is impossible. She's lying. She's nothing but... Elena lifted her hand, silencing him. Nothing? That's what you called me the night you tried to kill me. But tell me, Adrian, if I am nothing, why does my bloodline bear the Moore name? Why do I stand here with the truth your money can't bury? She gestured, and Richard Moore himself stepped from the shadows. His presence drew another wave of shock. The patriarch, long absent from public view, walked to Elena's side, his hand resting on her shoulder with unmistakable pride. She is my granddaughter, Richard announced, his voice a thunderclap. The only true heir to Moore shipping. The hall erupted. Investors surged forward with questions. Photographers flashed, capturing the image of Elena standing tall beside the Titan himself. Adrian's face twisted with fury. No, she's lying. She's manipulating you. I built this company. Richard's gaze was cold as stone. You built nothing. You squandered. You betrayed. And worst of all, you tried to erase her. That ends tonight. Selina, sensing the shift, tried to salvage control. She stepped forward, her smile brittle. Ladies and gentlemen, let's not be hasty. This woman abandoned Adrian. She has no proof of anything. Elena turned to her, eyes blazing. Proof? She raised her hand. A screen lit up behind her, playing a video. The crowd hushed as footage appeared, grainy but clear. Adrian's hand striking her shoulder, shoving her into the sea. Selina's laughter ringing in the background. Gasps turned into cries of outrage. Adrian lunged toward the screen. This is fabricated, lies. But the damage was done. Investors recoiled. Journalists shouted questions. Security moved closer. Selina's grip on Adrian's arm slackened, her eyes darting like a cornered animal. Elena stood unshaken. You thought humiliation would break me. You thought silence would bury me. But tonight I bury you with the truth. The applause began, not polite, not tentative, but thunderous. Investors cheered, journalists clapped, the crowd rising in a wave of support. For the first time, Adrian was not the star of the room. Elena was. Adrian's face contorted, sweat beading on his brow. He turned to Selina, desperate. Say something, fix this. But Selina had already slipped her arm away. Her smile was gone, her eyes cold. She whispered, just loud enough for those nearby to hear, I don't sink with ships. And then she stepped back, leaving him alone. Adrian shouted, his voice breaking. You'll regret this, Elena. You can't just... Two security guards closed in. At Richard's nod, they seized Adrian by the arms. The crowd watched as the once proud mogul was dragged from the ballroom, his protests drowned by applause. Cameras captured every second, the fall of a man who believed he was untouchable. Elena stood in the center of it all, the storm she had become blazing in her eyes. She did not flinch, she did not falter. And as Adrian's shouts faded into the distance, Elena raised her chin, ready to claim the empire that had always been hers. But the true battle, the rebuilding, the healing, was only beginning. The ballroom had erupted in chaos after Adrian's removal, yet Elena remained steady at its center. The storm of flashing cameras, rushing journalists, and buzzing whispers seemed to swirl around her without touching her. For the first time, she was not the silent wife in the shadows. She was the name on every tongue, the headline on every page, the force that commanded the room. Richard's voice rose above the clamor. This company belongs to Elena Moore, he declared. From this day forward, she will lead Moore shipping. Anyone who doubts her will answer to me. The applause was deafening. Investors surged forward, pledging loyalty. Reporters shouted questions, but Elena lifted her hand and silence fell. Her voice, calm and unwavering, carried through the hall. I did not ask for this fight, but it came to me when the man I trusted most tried to take my life. I survived not by luck, but by will. And now I will ensure that no one, no woman, no child, no worker in this company will ever be treated as disposable again. The room thundered with approval. In that moment, Elena wasn't just reclaiming an empire, she was rewriting its values. Adrian, meanwhile, was escorted into the night in disgrace. His protests fell on deaf ears. By dawn, news outlets across the globe carried the story. Shipping mogul exposed, wife he tried to kill returns as heiress. His accounts were frozen, his investors gone, his reputation shattered. Selina, true to her words, abandoned him. She was seen days later on the arm of another wealthy patron, her bracelet flashing, her loyalty already sold to the highest bidder. For Adrian, there was no comeback. He was the man who lost everything, not to a rival businessman, but to the woman he had underestimated. Elena's journey did not end with revenge. It began with rebuilding. She spent weeks reorganizing more shipping. Corrupt partners were cut off. Workers who had been exploited were granted fair contracts. She traveled to the docks, walking among sailors and staff, speaking to them directly. "This company isn't built on greed," she told them. "It's built on the strength of the people who sail its ships." Word spread quickly. Elena wasn't just a figurehead. She was a leader. Investors who once wavered rallied behind her. Employees, once weary, felt pride again. The empire Adrian had tried to hollow out pulsed with new life. Yet the truest rebuilding happened in her heart. In the quiet of her new home, a villa overlooking the ocean, Elena prepared for motherhood. The nursery she had once dreamed of in Adrian's mansion came to life here. Soft blues, white curtains fluttering in the breeze, a cradle carved from oak. She decorated it with her own hands, each stroke of paint a promise to her child that their world would be different. One evening, Richard visited the nursery. He watched her adjust the blankets in the cradle, her face illuminated by the golden glow of a lamp. His voice was rough with emotion. "Your father would be proud," he said. Elena looked up, tears glistening. "I hope so. I hope I can be the kind of parent he wanted to be." Richard placed a hand on her shoulder, steady and warm. "You already are. You fought for life when everything tried to take it from you. That's strength. That's what your child will inherit." Weeks later, Elena stood on the balcony of the Moore shipping headquarters, addressing the press for the first time. The sea stretched wide behind her, the very sea that had nearly ended her. She wore a simple dress, her belly round, her presence radiant. She spoke not of Adrian, nor of Selina, but of resilience. "I was thrown into the ocean with the hope I would disappear. But women are not so easily erased. We are not ornaments, not trophies, not shadows. We are strength, we are storms, and when we rise for ourselves, for our children, and for the future." The crowd erupted, not in polite applause, but in thunderous cheers. Elena's words were quoted across the world, turning her from scandal survivor to symbol of resilience. That night, as the city lights glittered across the waves, Elena sat by the window of her villa. She felt her child kick, a gentle nudge of life within her. She smiled softly, her hand resting over her belly. "You and I," she whispered, "we survived. And now we live, not in fear, not in shadows, but in light." The ocean roared outside, but its sound no longer frightened her. It was no longer the place of her near death. It was the place of her rebirth. And so the story closed not with bitterness but with justice. Adrian lived with nothing but regret. Selina chased fleeting glitter, forever empty. But Elena walked forward with dignity. Her name restored, her child safe, her future hers to command. Because in the end, the woman who had been forced into the sea did not drown. She learned to sail it. So, that's it, my wonderful friends. The story has come to an end. If you're still here with me right now, it means something in this journey has touched your heart in a special way. And maybe that's the real magic of stories like Elena's. They remind us that no matter how deep the darkness, there's always a way back into the light. Her journey speaks to every one of us who has ever felt erased, betrayed, or pushed aside. Life may throw us into storms we never asked for, but as the Stoic philosopher Seneca once said, "Fire tests gold, and adversity tests the brave." Elena was tested in the cruelest of ways, yet she rose stronger than before, turning her pain into power. That's a lesson we can all carry. When life tries to drown you, learn not only to swim, but to sail. Maybe you've faced moments where you felt invisible, abandoned, or silenced. Let this story be a reminder. You are not defined by the hands that tried to push you down, but by your own choice to rise again. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." Elena's strength was born the moment she chose not to give up, and so can yours. So here's what I want to leave you with. Don't be afraid of your storms. They are shaping you into someone unshakable. And if Elena's journey has touched you tonight, if you feel that fire burning a little brighter in your own chest, then I invite you, like this video, share it with someone who needs hope and subscribe to our channel. Because together we're not just telling stories, we're building a community of resilience, courage, and healing. Stay strong, stay hopeful, And remember, you are not a shadow. You are the storm.